Good evening. If you're watching us live, you can see Kevin and I. If you are viewing us, or rather listening to us on a podcast, what will be important for you to know for this conversation is I'm white and Kevin is not, even though his name is Kevin White. And normally we don't introduce people by their skin color, but the topic tonight's about that. And again, I'm holding up the book, Growing Up White, an Oreo's Guide to Fitting In, that Kevin wrote, and very excited about this. In fact, if you're watching this on our Facebook channel, if you want to comment somewhere, anywhere during this dialogue as you're watching, we're going to actually take one comment and send this book to someone who comments. So we're giving away one free book tonight, and I'm so glad you're here with me, Kevin. I got this book about 2 weeks ago, and first of all, it's an easy read in the sense of it wasn't a lot of big words that I didn't understand, but it was a good read. I went right through it in almost one setting, and as you can see, I got all kinds of notes and highlights all the way through this thing. But I want to take just a moment before we crawl into the book and let you give us a little bit of your background, who you are, where you grew up, how you grew up. It's kind of give us the setting for the book and why you wrote the book.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I'm really pleased, and I'd be happy to share my book with everybody. And it's actually me in between pages. That's what this expresses myself. So I grew up in a military family. My dad was in the Air Force air traffic controller, and we lived on bases for 12 years at least when I was born. So we went everywhere but middle high school. So after that, my dad retired, and I ended up joining the military myself. I joined the National Guard in 1985, and because that's what I was used to. Military life was my life before that, and I wanted to get back to it. And you'll find out for other reasons why I did that when we talk further on. I have retired 30 years, Air National Guard, or Air Force. Everybody understands that. I was an aircraft mechanic for 30 years, and I enjoyed every minute of it. And I wish I could do it again. And I enjoyed being in the military and serving my country and pledging allegiance to the flag and living the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Now I work as a contractor on the base at Wright-Patterson. I'm also a owner of Brownie Fox Publishing, and that's what my pin is for here, somewhere here. Representing my company, and we are actually looking for authors to sign. And if you have a book idea or something, we can talk about that later. And at the end, I'll tell you how to contact me. But it's a pleasure being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So the title of the book alone is already fascinating. Growing Up White, an Oreo's Guide to Fitting In. And I love how you have an actual Oreo with a bite out of it out of here. How'd you get the title of the book?
Well, my last name is White. So it was perfect. So everybody kept saying when I was growing up or after my dad retired that I wasn't really black and I acted white. You act white, you talk proper. And that bothered me because I didn't really see myself. I knew I was black. Let's get that straight. But I didn't see myself the way other people did, because when I was on base, people thought a little differently. Everybody was like one big community of different races and everything. So we didn't have these kind of racial issues even back in the 70s. And if they did have issues like that, then your commander, the commander of your father, would talk to him and he'd be admonished for that. So it's kind of like
that's within the Air Force context.
Yes. That didn't happen. Or they didn't let that happen, which is a great thing. So, but on the flip side, it kind of jaded me into believing everybody got along, racially. So when we first started going to civilian schools after my dad retired, then I would see that everybody would say, "Hey, you talk proper. You don't talk like us. Why do you act white? Why do you live in a white neighborhood?" So a lot of questions to things that I had to deal with that I couldn't really answer, and I could not fit in to that community, the black community.
And about how old were you when Dad retired and you started public schools?
I was about 12.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So a really crucial age for kind of fitting in and
Yes.
Where do I belong and sorting out who you are in the midst of the group.
Junior high school and right into high school. So the very first bus ride to junior high was a nightmare because there was a division. The black kids sat in the back, the white kids sat in the front, and the white kids did not fight the black kids. And I didn't understand that. That's something that was really foreign to me because there's no division that I realized when I grew up. And here, it's completely divided. Even at the school was like that. And there are expectations.
Now, was that a school mandatory division, a bus mandatory division, or is that just how it happened?
That's just how.
In regards to the bus, sorry.
Yeah, that's how we got to school. And there was my sister and I went home saying, we don't want to go back. We hate this place. It's not, right. So they told my sister, they used to get on her too. You don't style your hair right. You don't talk right. This, that, and the other. And it was the black kids. The black kids.
The black kids, okay.
Because just like in the animal kingdom, if you're different, then you're an outcast.
Okay.
And so that's how we felt. Same thing with my brother. And it was traumatic. So we hated going to school. So my sister was into art, and she went deep into the art program, and I was into music. I was a musician, so that's where I lost myself with my musician friends. And I did that in high school too, and I really didn't stray from that too much because everybody had something in common when you're in the music department. So I was a music geek, and still am today.
So the bus situation is a good example, I think, of the beginning of what I understand to be the title of the book, which is an Oreo. So give us a definition of what an Oreo is.
Well, the plain definition is black on the outside and white on the inside. So you're black, you appear to be black, milkshake color, whatever you want to call it. But on the inside, you don't act black. So that's a title people give you when you don't act the way you look. So it's very archaic. It's what you see is what you get is not how the world really works. You can't be fair like that. And that's how we were treated. So for the whites, we were black, completely black. But for
because of the color of your skin.
Yes. Right. And I can get into that a little later, but they would treat you like you're really black. But when you black people, you're not black. You're ostracized from just by the way you act, your actions. And sometimes it's the clothes too, because we didn't have the right kind of clothes. We didn't do the right kind of walk and everything. So we were outcast.
I like in your book, you say it's kind of like being raised by wolves. The boy who was raised by wolves. He realizes he's not really a wolf, but he also realizes because of how he's grown up, he's not really a normal boy either. And you spend a lot of time in the book really helping what I think is an encouraging message to others who are struggling to figure out where they fit in, saying how I struggled to fit in. I struggled to do this. And so give me a little example, like just give us one example of how you really wrestled with that. You talked about moments in a gym class. You talked about moments in band class in the book. Give us an example of, hey, this is how I did. I wasn't really a black kid. I really wasn't a white kid either.
So I was myself. I was just a student. I didn't consider myself black or white. I don't have any preference for one or the other. But, stereotypes always came up. That was the biggest thing. So one time I was running this relay in elementary school. No, it was maybe junior high. So I get up there to the line and some kid tells me, a white kid says, "Oh, you're going to win this for sure." And guess what? I didn't, because I wasn't that good of a runner at the time. It's all about perception. So when I got to the line, I had so much pressure on me that I had to be Jesse Owens, because everybody knows back then the black athletes were faster runners. You saw them in the Olympics and everything, and even heroes of people like that, Jesse Owens, and then you had Moses from Dayton. So expectations were pretty high for somebody who wasn't really black. I'll just put it that way. So everything you live, they look at and they judge. Who is they? Both sides.
Sure.
So it's enormous pressure to deliver, and that was one of the biggest things I didn't put in the book. There's a lot of peer pressure on both sides, which are expectations, based on what you look like.
I remember in college, I almost always played with interracial teams, and so but I remember stepping on the court one year and one of my teammates saying, "Hey Shiv," that's what they called me. "Hey Shiv, that guy's going to kill you." And I turned to him and I go, "Why do you think that?" I mean, I hadn't seen anything that would make this guy look like he was anything impressive. He goes, "He's black and you're not." Again, just the stereotypes that we use, So,
yeah, you've probably seen that too. Yeah, but mine is like on both sides.
Right.
I'm in the middle, pressure. We're in the no man's land.
Yeah.
Where I have to live that life, which it seems like you're by yourself. You're never part of any other group.
Yeah, so that piece actually surprised me when I read your book. I'd never thought of it, never even heard of it. In fact, you use a term that I kind of laughed at a little bit, but RBP,
yes.
and real black people. And so take a moment and define that for us and tell us what that means.
Well, a friend of mine read this, and he says, "You're going to get yourself beat up calling people real black people." So I said, "Hey, wait a minute. The people I talk about call me not being a black person. I'm not a real black person, so that's why I call them real black people." Well, those are the people who live to the expectations, the culture, and whatever they're required to be real blacks. And this only applies to blacks, that are RBPs, or real black people, that are down, which, I've been told that I'm not really down for the cause. I don't do this, I don't live in the right place, I don't do that. So, those are the things that push you away from people. Once you start talking, I can appear to be an RBP until I start talking. So that gives me away, right? I'm done. I know as soon as I start talking or I don't do the right actions, then my cover is blown. I can hold my cover for a while until certain things happen. So I can.
The language gives you away.
The language, sometimes the actions, the car you drive, and the things that you do that you're not supposed to do. So
now this is, we see this in our culture everywhere, even today, especially in politics. I see people being told you're not a real black person because you don't vote a certain way, you don't stand with a certain type of thing, you don't agree with whatever was going on. So this isn't an isolated situation. In fact, I don't know, would you say, hey, there are places where this is actually getting worse today than it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago?
Well, this is kind of tricky. I'm going to say, when I'm afraid of little towns, as you read in there, and because there's still that stereotype. I'm still black, right? I'm not. I appear to be black, and people accept me as being 100% black, a real black person that don't know me. If you don't know me, you don't know who I am or where I'm from. That's why we shouldn't judge people on the way they look or where they come. Where they come from is not what you think. Everybody thought I grew up in the hood. I've had people told me, I know you grew up in the hood. You made it out of there. It's like, I never lived in the hood. Why do you assume that I lived in the hood? Or they'll say things like, well, we know who you voted for. Like, so everything's assumed on one side. And if you don't do it on the other side, then you're chastised for it. So you can't be Republican, you can't do this, you can't do that in the black community. And the people in the white community don't expect you to be those things. So, or they assume you do what the stereotype is. And that's the problem. Everything's about stereotypes and assumptions. And that's a lot of my book is what I talk about. But people are individuals, and the most primitive thing you can do is to judge people by what they look like and assume. But you have TV, Hollywood, everybody does the stereotypes, and you have the movies, the black movies that stereotype and accentuate everything I'm talking about, in the wrong way, the wrong direction. So it's hard to be yourself with your own expectations. But I always try to be me, period.
Yeah. So there might be a section of our audience or those listening right now who are going, hey, does racism still exist? And not just from you, but the easiest example that I hear from many of my friends has to do with being pulled over or being stopped on the side of the road. And I loved your example of, I'm afraid to drive through a small town. And I just thought, absolutely, I get that. And so tell us why that is, because again, these are little pockets that if I live in isolation of my own information bubble, I can go, hey, we've had a black president. We've done this. We've done this. Maybe racism's done with, in spite of what I hear, but there is still some discrimination, or at least some pieces of that are still around. So give us an example of that.
So I think I'm a little different because my dad and mother, my father and mother, grew up in small towns in Ohio near the Virginia border, West Virginia. And they had a lot of racism back then. And I've seen some of the stuff that happened in those towns. So that's one of the reasons I am hesitant to drive or to stop. I'm just say stop through little towns because with no black populations. Because like I said, I'm still black. I'm not, nobody, I can't have a sign, I'm not really black on me. I'm not, I'm just myself. But those kind of things I'm still leery of. For some reason, I feel better about it today. But remember, I grew up in the 70s, and we saw these things. We lived out in North Carolina in the South, and we had people use the N-word. I didn't really understand, off base, they would do that. But I have seen that. So, but it doesn't really register in my mind until my dad retired. Things are like different. It's a whole other world out there. Being on base, living as a child, it's a fantasy world. It doesn't make you ready. I have heard this from a lot of kids. It doesn't get you ready for what happens in public schools.
Yeah,
it's completely different. So that's a hard adjustment. And I talk to kids who are in and their parents who are still in. Watch your children when you get out. Make sure they have a smooth transition. You got to teach them. My dad tried to teach me, hey, this is what's going to be like, but I didn't believe him because no, everybody's fine. Everybody's the same. And then it turned out not to be true, and he was right. But it took me a long time to figure that out.
Yeah. Well, when it was explained to me, it was, Aaron, what did you tell your kids when they started to drive if a police officer came behind them and pulled them over? And I said, you just pull over and hand the officer your license and your registration. And he said, if you're a black person, you don't do that. The officer gets up to your door, you have your hands on the steering wheel where they can see him. You say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. And again, the point there was, whether we like it or not, there's still stereotypes around, and you got to be more careful as a black person.
Right. I wouldn't say you have to be more careful. I think you need to use common sense, because I've been pulled over a few times. And one time, coming in Reynoldsburg, Ohio, that was in the early 80s. The guy stopped me for no reason. He said somebody robbed a store. I just came back. I just left. I was working at the store. So I came back. I said, what store is it? Because I just left work. And he wouldn't tell me.
I'm laughing because I remember the story, and I was like, you got to be kidding me.
So, yeah, there are, that's kind of rare. If you treat people with respect, and I was in the military at the time. So if you treat people with respect, then they'll treat you back with respect. Now, if they don't, then they cross the line. So I, like I said in the book, I wish the guy Merry Christmas because he's starting to take me downtown. That kind of thing, for no reason. There was no crime. Nothing happened. I wasn't a suspect. Are you going to arrest me or not? But that's the only time that ever happened. Any other time, I'm very respectful. And that's the way you treat everybody. That's not just the cops. So if you get up and you run, it's on you. Unfortunately, if you're not guilty, then act like you're not guilty. Anybody who makes another move, and this is what I hate about, what happens, you see on TV, they always say, well, let's see if the kid was black, then it's a racist thing. But that's not always the case. So does racism exist? Yes, but it's not like it used to be. There's a lot of changes that have happened since the 80s when I started living on my own. There's a lot of things that have changed. And you see it everywhere, TV, commercials. You go to the mall. Somebody asked me on a podcast once, is racism blatant? And I said, I go to Meijer, we get along. I go to the movies, I go to the baseball games or whatever. Nothing happens. There's no riots that break out. What you see on TV is not quite the reality that we're living. So I have a lot of hope for this country and things, that could have happened or are happening are magnified past their in my opinion, reality.
Yeah. Well, you say we each grew up in a unique culture, and then you define culture as a set of customs and beliefs. So give us a few examples of white culture versus black culture, and then you kind of have this whole other separate culture that's Oreo. And again, each one of these is a stereotype, so they don't always stand. I appreciate
Yes.
that, but just give us a couple examples of the different
Sure.
stereotypes within the three cultures.
So in the white culture, back, when I was in high school, you really did cross the line and to date with blacks and whites didn't really date much. That wasn't, I mean, it happened, but it was more discouraged. And, I saw that in high school, people talking about that. And the reality was it really never happened where I was. The white culture expects you to be on time. Which is still the truth, right?
Actually, it's the one I run into all on a regular basis. I'm like, I expect to be there early.
And the white culture, unfortunately, for me, about 95% would assume that I'm, from the hood, because it was very divided in the early 80s. My first year at high school, we went there, was the first time they integrated our public high school with busing. So everybody thinks you're from the bus.
And you were in Columbus?
Yeah. Everybody thinks you took the bus from there, and everybody assumes. And no, I live right around the corner. As a matter of fact, we were one of 3 black families that lived in that neighborhood because my dad moved to that neighborhood. That's another thing they got. That's a strike against me right there, not living in the right neighborhood.
When you said you and your brother actually went on like some kind of a peace campaign going around the
That's
neighborhood.
what we had to do.
Yeah.
Because people assume that we're something that we weren't. That we're stereotyped because you watch TV. That's how it happens. We don't have the big boombox over our shoulders or anything, but we would go to our neighbors and everything and make friends because that's one of the things you do when you're a military brat. You make friends quick. And you go from base to base, and every 2 years you have to make new friends. So that we were really good at it. So that's what we did. So we smoothed everything out so people would accept us because we're not RBPs. We were thinking that's what the mission was, but that's what we did, and it paid off. I mean, that's what kind of person I am today. Bring people together. So black culture does not like. I have to be honest here. If you stray from what they believe, then you're an outcast, like I said earlier, and you're going against their cause, whatever the cause is. I don't know what I haven't figured it out yet. I don't know if it's to be something or what it is. But the other thing is where you live. They expect you to live in the neighborhoods, our neighborhoods, for the cause, black neighborhoods. And they expect you to talk like blacks from the neighborhood, and that's and to be hip enough to be part of that culture, which I could never be. So, and there's a lot of pressure for that, and the clothes you wear, the shoes, and everything. Everything's about appearance and behavior. So if you don't do that, then you're out. You might as well be white, according to them. So you're not really black. The Oreo culture doesn't fit into the white culture. This is going back in time here because we can never get accepted fully. That's the difference. Can't get accepted into the black culture because the blacks don't accept us. And I still, even to this day, the church I go to, people will say, "You're not really black. You're not really one of us." And no wonder your last name is White. So we're in between. We're our own community, and it's really actually, it's not a good thing because if you watch YouTube videos of Oreos, they'll tell you if you research it, and a lot of them are depressed because they don't fit into any one of the cultures. And some of these kids, for whatever reason, like some are military brats as well, the same thing, and they can't cope with it. They don't have any friends, and this is one of the reasons I wrote the book. To outreach, and I've talked to a lot of Oreo kids and families, and this is a huge problem unfortunately, some kids talk about, they wish they were white, or they don't want to live because it depends on where you live. If you're in the hood and you're Oreo, then it's even worse because, that's, you're an outcast. You can't ever, once you get past your formative years, you can't change.
Yeah, you actually even talked a bit about that when you said you actually feared violence in the ghettos.
Yes.
And because you weren't black enough.
Right. Yes. Because, I could walk with a limp or whatever, but my cover is blown. I can't. I just don't have it. So in the book, I even say, what would it be like if I grew up there? What would I be? Would my hair be better? Would I have better clothes? Would I know how to do things I don't? And thing is, it's a rich culture, and there are things I really wish I could do. I had. So, and I envy a lot of people that have it. I don't have any rhythm. I have none.
We will work well together.
So, and I played bass, guitar, and I still play guitar, but I don't have that. I don't have it. I just don't have it.
I get it.
But I play like a white guy. They tell me so. Whatever that means. There are things like things I wish I could do, just like the Oreo. He doesn't belong to any group. The Oreo, he or she, is on their own. There's a girl who has her own webpage, and calls herself, I can't remember, the Oreo white girl, whatever, and she uses RBP as well. And it's kind of funny. People make fun of it. Some people do. They make it, humorous because that's what we need. Things like that.
Yeah. When I was in high school, I grew up in a small community where several different communities that we all came together to make one school, and I didn't think much of it back then when I was a kid, but we seemed to have one or two black kids per grade. So
right.
that was my experience, and Anthony was in the grade above us, and there were moments where I remember kind of cutting up before a game, whether it was basketball or whatever, and I remember the guys Anthony would give, all right, this is how you talk kind of black person class. And I was no good at it. I just sat there and stared at him. I'm like, okay, that's amazing. A whole other language. And I didn't think anything of it until I got into college. And what we joked about with Anthony, and what Anthony, again, probably felt as what you would describe an Oreo, which he certainly was. When I got to college, my experience was different in the sense of, hey, here's people from all over who, some of them did grow up in the hood or the ghetto, and
right.
Some of them grew up in other countries. And so as that came together, I certainly appreciated the idea that all these cultures in different areas and different, again, colors mean something. In fact, you addressed that with a term that, again, I had never really heard or knew well. It's one of those that I went, I've heard this once or twice, but you said colorism.
Colorism, yeah.
And that's a real thing. Would you take a moment and describe what that means for us?
Colorism, that's things especially in the Caribbean, where you have black natives and you have Indians as well. And when they come over, the blacks come over to the United States, they do not fit into black culture at all. I know I have a lot of friends that I've talked to over time, some people I work with, and they would struggle. And I'd ask them, when I was writing the book, I said, hey, you have any trouble fitting into the black community? And they would say, yes, we don't fit in at all because we're not from there. And so like I was saying earlier, you can't acculturate yourself fully, especially if you have an accent. And to some people, I do have an accent, because one of my superpowers is I can call on the phone and people think I'm white. But when I show up, I'm not. And they would say, are you Mr. White? I've had people tell me, call me and come over to the house. A few years later, they're like, you know what? I have to be honest. I thought you were white. I was looking for a white guy. So, and my wife's being from the country. She does the same thing. People don't realize who she is. They think she's a white person. It's just a different culture. So she's not from there either, but she spent more time in the black community than I have, so she can get by. Plus, she can sing.
Yeah. For me, one of the saddest things that we recognize as a church leader is that probably the most segregated moment in time, as far as the week, is on Sunday morning.
Yes.
We have our black churches, we have our white churches, we have our Hispanic churches, we have our Korean churches.
Yes, right.
Ironically, the kingdom of God is supposed to be for all people,
Mm-hmm.
on Sunday morning tends to isolate itself based off of some cultural standard or color of skin or whatever. On Sunday morning, the worst. What do you, when you look at our culture? I see that as a problem in the church, but when you look at our culture and again you bring a unique perspective to it, do you see pockets of racism still around? Do you see places where, hey, human rights are being affected and we're not really caring for each other well because of the color of our skin?
Yes, I do. And getting back to what you're talking about, churches, segregation, I think a lot of that is changing slowly. As a matter of fact, a lot of the praise and worship artists, the black ones, are going mainstream because the black community is not as big as people think it is as far as music, and they're realizing they can reach more people by coming. And that's CC Winans is doing it, and other people are starting to do it. They're realizing, wait a minute. Why am I holding myself back? And we should all be together. We should all worship together.
Amen.
God doesn't see you as a black person or a white person, but a lot of the cultural stuff is music. I think that's the number one thing that'll keep blacks from joining white churches, or one of the things, because it's the music, it's the beat, it's the way that things are delivered. Sometimes it's the preaching.
Sure.
Because does he preach well? And that's like one of the things. So it's a whole other thing. And I noticed, because I went to a white church for a long time until I got married, and we started going to integrated black churches, and the worship is different. But my wife always says worship is so much more free in the white churches. So, and that's just it's not absolute. That's just what I hear, what she says, and I kind of agree with her. And it's not everybody, it can be everywhere, but pockets of racism. Yes, I hate to say some certain things, but when you're an Oreo or you're undercover, you hear things that you wouldn't normally hear, and and I would hear this at work. People would talk about white people, and sometimes you hear it at church. I'm thinking, why would you say that? But they don't know, right? I'm okay, I'm safe,
Right.
And that's why they'll start talking. So I'm like, I see that side. I don't see the other side because nobody would say that. So because it's like if somebody came, like I mentioned, that to your place and then they left, they would say, who's that white guy? They would come right out and say it. Not a problem. I don't know, it probably happens, who's the black guy? In a lot of other countries, they come right out and say it. The fat white man, I remember I was in Panama, the natives would say that, fat white man told us to do this. But it's not really a good thing to say in this country. I mean, it's an accurate description, but I do see those among individuals that I have, had dealings with, and I know, and then people would tell me, hey, they say this behind your back, but I don't really care because, oh, that's good, it's not really black, right? So yeah, there are, but in my opinion, if you look around, like the NFL and all the college, people wear the uniforms of the black players, and there's a lot of good stuff there.
Yeah.
Heroes. Michael Jordan's was everybody's hero.
Absolutely.
So, and
we all wanted to be Michael
Larry
Jordan.
Bird.
Yeah.
Larry Bird. I mean, I'm putting the blacks and whites together. You got it. I mean, they're just amazing people.
Yeah.
If you worship, sports star, that's not even the point right there. I mean, people respect people for what they can do more than what they know.
Yeah. One of the interesting pieces that I saw over and over again in your book was really a solution to the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And over again, it was just take the time to get to know people.
Yes, right.
Stop judging people by whatever. And again, you gave many examples. It's not just skin color, but weight, hair color, age, religion,
Mm-hmm.
what they're dressing. And again, you gave different ways that we, for better or for worse, we see each other long before any other interaction.
Yes.
And so we immediately make a couple of assumptions. And I'm guilty of it. Everybody's guilty of
Yes.
it because That's what we do. And we just embrace a little bit of, I make assumptions, they're not right. And they're not always correct. Sometimes they are,
Right,
but I'm
right.
going to make an assumption. They're not always right. But the solution was, at least as I understood it, get to know people.
Right. And that's exactly what I did growing up. We got to know people. We didn't, oh, he's white or he's black. It was just, we're just kids. We're just, in the neighborhood. I had friends all over. I mean, everybody played together because, we needed each other because that was it. Our community was our community. Then the next base is the same thing. So everything was so fluid. So that's how I look at people. I don't assume anybody's, from the way I grew up. That's the way I look at people. So, like you saw the example, if I go to Best Buy, and this has happened to me, I'm looking for something. They treat the guy in front of me, the white guy, talk to him normally, but when I get up there, it's like, hey man, how can I help you? I don't like that at all. I can't stand that. What's up? That's not me. I just treat me like I'm a regular person. And, I'm not what you assume. That's the thing that drives me crazy. They assume that, this is how as a black guy, I should talk like this because, that's the way they understand it. And I'll get brownie points for that. And that doesn't work for me. So sometimes, I'm not saying it's insulting, but there are assumptions that are useless. You can't do that to people, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But it's just me.
Yeah.
It's just me.
So one of the things that, again, I want to just pull out from you, you talk about in the midst of the stereotypes, this real need growing up to belong, to fit in. And when I work with youth, no matter what color, no matter where they're from, man, that's a huge need for our youth and for our adults too. Just usually by the time you got to be an adult, you've maybe figured out a few spots where you can belong, but it's not just a need for one group or the other, but I appreciated the fact that as an Oreo, there's an extra challenge that not everybody else faces because, again, I'm not black, I'm not white, I don't fit in with one more group that I'm isolated from kind of feeling. How is it that you, where did you begin to go, it's okay being who I am? At what point in your journey did you begin to go, this is kind of who I am and that's all right? Or were you always that way kind of?
Yeah, I was, but in high school, I pretty much avoided blacks because in middle school they would just tackle whites in the yard, which is blew my mind. They were just like, it was like they're out of control and they were trying to control what the white kids did. And
they would tackle them for fun or
just for nothing.
Oh, okay.
They weren't even playing the game. They would just tackle them. You just run up to them and run them over. This is like at break time.
Okay.
Out in the schoolyard, and nobody did anything about it. So that's one of the things that really surprised me. In high school, the same thing. We had so many that were unruly that made everybody, including me, look bad, and people would look at us like, "What are you doing?" kind of thing. But those things are hard to separate yourself from when you're Oreo. So. Because I didn't fit in. So what I did, I was separated pretty much from both cultures. I had friends, I dealt with and everything, but that's one reason I joined the military. So I could get back into something, the fantasy that really wasn't there.
Yeah.
I did that because, that's what I wanted to do. I knew that before I got out of high school. That's what I did because I wanted to. I wanted to serve and I wanted to live the Air Force life again. So, and that's when I kind of opened up and I realized the same thing because they're from the same places. So they weren't indoctrinated because the people who are, who work and who are members, they come from the same places I came from, right? They didn't grow up in the military. Some people did. So that's when I really realized this is what, this is the way it is. And I could cope with it that way, getting a brand new start on how things were and what I could do.
Yeah. One of the pieces that I work with the kids on is really helping them say, your primary identity is always rooted with Jesus. If you're a disciple of Christ, you're a disciple of Christ first. And everything else stems out of that, and everything else flows out of that. And we really work hard at just reminding kids you do belong. You belong to the body of Christ,
Right.
and unfortunately, the body of Christ doesn't always treat each other well still. But that's just one of the points of emphasis that, again, I just want to make here to everybody listening to the videos. Is if you are a member of the body of Christ, you do have a place where you belong, and you are a disciple first. And again, your sexuality, your skin color, your weight, your place of residence, your setting, all those are secondary in relation to that first. Jesus for everybody.
Right.
Let me move us into kind of hey, let's handle some really current issues. Right now, one of the big topics is critical race theory. And this is a big deal in America.
Right. Hear it all the time.
Hear it all. Yeah, you can't turn on the news without hearing about it, or whether it's being moved into a school system or not, and those standing against it and for it. And so, how do you define critical race theory?
I don't know that much about it, but I know it makes a lot of parents, black and white, upset because, we're making so many strides now. Think about all these interracial couples you see, and kids everywhere. I mean, people are integrated. Whites are dating blacks in high school, and I don't really see the need for it right now. I mean, maybe years and years ago, but I think it's a division thing, and because it's actually making things worse, in my opinion, because it's like you're black, treat blacks like this, when be an individual. And I tell when I speak at places, I tell people, be your own self. Don't be stuck. Don't be caught in whatever race you are. Don't be caught in whatever culture you belong to. You do whatever you have to do, because the truth is, there's nobody that won't hire you when you have the skills. If you have an engineering degree, you're going to get a great job. If you have other skills or trades or whatever, you're going to be hired. Nobody's going to discriminate, because people are going to make money from your talents. So it's all about you as an individual, not you as a race. In my opinion, that just makes things worse, because you can't put everybody in the same box.
Right.
And I'm proof of that. You have to be your own person. So as far as school curriculum, I don't see a need for that. In my world, it makes things worse, because it's actually racist to assume all black people were the same. That's my point right there. And then that all white people are against the blacks, so it doesn't make any sense. And the system and all that. And I do see that when I graduated at Wright State in 2017, I saw a lot of that in every class. Every class became social justice, even the stats class I took. So, that's what they're doing now. I don't think it's a good thing, only because we have to get past that. Yeah. And I think the more we don't do things like that, we all treat everybody the same, I think we're going to be much better off.
And it's challenging, because a lot of the language that's used in the surrounding critical race theory is the right words, if you will. For instance, Black Lives Matter. I mean, who doesn't want to agree with that concept? Right. But the organization I study, and I go, no, I don't want to have anything to do with this. I can't get behind the organization. But the language itself, again, the Black Lives Matter, and we need to care for other people. Just the language, I want to go, yeah, I support that. And so it's a tricky time in culture where you really got to go, what do you mean by that? What are you really saying there?
Well, you got to call what it is, because I have a lot of friends who believe in that. And the concept, yeah, I believe in the concept, but the actions are different than what the concepts are. And when you're hurting people, and the leaders claim themselves as Marxists, and they made $10 billion in 2020. And, they didn't, most of the money went to the Democrat Party, Act Blue. And they only got like $9 million, and they cut it for themselves. So I did a paper on that once, an article. And you're not helping anybody. And even they're fractioning now because they left them out of the money and everything. So they didn't even live up to what their name is. So all these people donated, for the black community, and nobody saw any of the money. Things like that are anti everything. And in the process, a lot of black businesses were destroyed. people were attacked. And once you cross that line, I mean, when you cross that line, you're taking somebody's liberty, and you're anti-constitution at that point. You're taking people's rights away, the pursuit of happiness. And when you destroy businesses and you target people because of their color, then I have a problem with that. And so should everybody else, all decent people. And I'll just say this: people may have belief in the concept of it, but those same people do not agree with the methods that they use to force people to follow that slogan. And I see people with the mask with that on it, and I don't like it.
Yeah. And they're one of the things, again, back to what's the solution. It really is sitting down with someone, getting to know them, and saying, hey, what do you really believe here? What do you really think is going on? What do you really want to support?
Yeah, I think I don't, if you go back and you think about this, the solution is you treat everybody with respect that you want to be treated. That's what it is.
Which really is just obeying Jesus when he says,
right.
Love your neighbor as yourself.
Exactly. That's love your neighbors as yourself. And that's the solution. That's the reason he said that. Because, there are a lot of people from different tribes and places there, and that's like the Good Samaritan. Just because it's Samaritan, don't judge him that way. Or you just take the guy and treat him differently because he's not one of you. So I think that's the most profound thing from the Bible, that it tells you this is how you treat other people. Do you want to be treated like this or not? Do you want to live by the sword, or do you want to live by the peace? And it's all about peace. You got to be respectful of others, no matter. I mean, these people aren't trying to attack you. You shouldn't hate people just because of what they look like. That makes no sense at all. That's caveman primitive, in my opinion. I have no respect for people like that, and I've heard people talk like that on both sides. But.
One of my mentors on a regular basis will say, hey, remember, in the world of politics, as with everywhere else, often there's more that unites us than divides us. Right. And so one of the challenges then is when we focus on what divides us, that's what we're going to see. And we claim that in churches, the Baptist church and the Methodist church, the Protestant church, the Lutheran church, and non-denominational. Right. We can all start saying, hey, we baptize this way, we do communion this way, and we can all start walking away from each other, or we can all say, hey, what really unites us? Well, it's Jesus. And we can all come back to the table and go, hey, these things are big things, but they're not the thing. And the thing that unites us is Jesus. And I think it's a critical time for America to begin to go, especially in America, what does unite us? And what would bring us all to the table? And again, just recognize, hey, we're really trying to get the same problems solved.
Right.
We gotta talk through how we're doing it better, because we're not doing it well. And there's some major differences in how we do it. And again, I think we all have the same problem we identify, at least many of us, and we all go, it needs a solution, but how we do it's got to be talked through quite a bit more.
Yes, it does. I agree. But like I always say in the book, and I say in there repeatedly, we're just primitive people with modern technology, because we take everything. It's like in politics, perfect example. If a guy is fat, they make fun of him because they see that. It's visual. If he's short, all this stuff. We're lucky we're tall, right? Because I can imagine living. That'd be like a triple whammy if I was short.
If you were short, yeah.
No offense to short people, but no, there's everything. There's always something. If I was really big, it's always something they pick out that stands out. If everybody is white in the room, there's something they pick out. Bald hair, short guy, and then I see that at work all the time. So just like the mindset in the churches is doing the same thing. Yeah. There's something different that we have to pick out. I don't know if it's a primitive survival mode or what. I don't know what it is, but we see it all the time.
Yeah. One of the interesting pieces that I loved that you brought out was you admit from your worldview, not everyone's going to get along. Mm-hmm. Again, we want to live in this world where everybody's going to eventually get along, or if you just get enough education, or if we just give everybody enough economic leverage, they'll all get along. Mm-hmm. The reality of it is not everybody's going to get along. Because the problem isn't education, the problem isn't finances, the problem isn't racism, the problem isn't equity, the problem is sin.
Right. Yes.
And so, racism is a result of sin.
Mm-hmm.
Prejudice is a result of sin. And so one of the things that I keep reminding people, again, if Jesus says love your neighbor as yourself, okay, to follow him, I've got to turn away from sin, and then I obey all his teachings. And so one of the fascinating pieces that I just see in our cultures over and over again, we're trying to fix a symptom of the problem that only God can fix. And
Yes,
that's just my 2 cents.
Yes. Yes. I totally agree with that. And so that's, the racism is on both sides in this case. It's the blacks and the whites in the Oreo world. And I give an example of the Fresh Prince. This is for older people, right?
Yeah, those of us who knew the show and grew up watching it.
Well, they still play it today.
Oh, do they?
My kids know it. But so in the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the star is the real black RVP. Okay, he and his friend Jeff moved to Hollywood, where the blacks have sold out. Because if you move out of the neighborhood, you're sold out. And I've been told I'm sold out. So they're he's an attorney or a judge or something, and the family doesn't talk black, and they don't act black. So the whole thing about the show is to put the people down that have sold out with the wisdom and knowledge from the hood of real black people. And they always shame them for saying, hey, you guys, you let go of your roots and now you're successful, but this is more important. So that was like an eye-opening show for me, thinking, wow, so these are the geeks, they don't fit in, they make fun of them. And that's exactly, that show was my life. So, but it was written to go against people who succeed, because you're not cool if you look. And that's one of the other issues I had was there's this thing where blacks don't encourage, as much as they should, people to go to college, kids, or they'd say, why are you in college? Why are you doing that? It's like not a priority. It's not the biggest thing, high school graduation, one thing, and then people just go to college and, they're gone for a few years, or they're not encouraging, this is how you get it. Because there are ways you can get scholarships, these smaller colleges, and people are looking for minorities there, but it's not something that you really see out much. So that's part of it's an education thing, so.
All right, so you write 2 more things. You write, and again, you help identify several of the stereotypes and all, but unfortunately, and I say that unfortunately, a large portion of our church is white. So give us a hand here. What is something you would say to the white congregation listening to say, hey, here's some things that maybe just be mindful of, be careful with, be alert to within ourselves. We want to live properly. We want to do the right thing. So what's 1 or 2 things you'd say, hey, just be mindful of this?
I go back to what I said before, just treat people the way you want to be treated. There's, when somebody shows up that doesn't look like you, which I hate. I hate that phrase. People that don't look like, I cannot stand that.
Nobody looks like me.
Right. Oh, so, I hate saying that. If somebody shows up, they don't look like you, then so what? Just treat them the way you treat everybody else. And I've seen the reverse of that at my church. So, and these are the things that drive me crazy. And, I wish there was a magic wand, but some people you just can't treat, you can't teach, you can't show them or tell them what to do. That's all about individuals and respect. That's pretty much it. I can't really, like I said before, treat everybody like they would treat yourself or whatever. So you have to be your own individual, treat everybody like they are you. They're another version of you. That's the way I put it. And I don't judge anybody until, I know them. I find out what they're all about. Sometimes you never know.
And that takes time.
Yeah, right. But right off the bat, if I go somewhere, I treat you like, hey, you're my neighbor. I respect my neighbors. You expect to. Total strangers. And the kind of thing my advantage was that's what I did as a kid. You meet people, and I still do that today. I can make friends really fast, and I can have a conversation. I'm really good at conversation, so that's what I do. I can just fit right in. As far as friends, I can make friends. But after that, after the friendship, I still feel that like the kind of like tension there, like I don't really belong here kind of thing. But all that stuff I don't worry about. I just continue what I'm doing. I just want to point out the differences. Now, I mean, I'm retired and everything. I do the same thing, make friends quick, and and I don't judge. I just do it.
So
there are advantages there.
Yeah, there might be a handful of kids who are, as you would say, also Oreos, or other adults listening. What's one or two things you would say to them to say, hey, let me just help you. Let me give you some guidance as someone who's walked that path already, and here's one or two things I would just recommend to you in the sense of it's going to be okay.
I think it was Yertle Turtle said, "Don't try to be somebody else." This is a cartoon I used to watch when I was a kid, and it was like amazing. Everybody tried to be somebody else. They weren't, and he was says, "You are what you are. He is what you is. Don't try to be somebody you're not, and don't try to fit into some place you'll never fit in." I mean, you could play the game just like Tupac. He wasn't from the hood. The whole thing was like a career for him. He chose. He wasn't really what he was, but nobody knows that. Very few people know that. You can get away with it. Nobody knows your real life when you're a superstar like that. Right. Nobody knows what you're like at home. Just like Kobe Bryant wasn't what people thought he was. He didn't grow up like that either. He was, I think, was a military brat as well, but he could play basketball. Right. But that's the most important thing. So I would say nothing. I mean, just be yourself. That's the easiest thing for you to do is your truest self. If you have to improve that, then do that too, right along with it. If you have flaws or whatever, if you're offending people by what you're doing, then, like I said, you got to respect people. Both ways. The way you act and how they act, things they think, and the things you believe. That's all. That's all. Everybody's individual ability, individual rights. That's just the way it is. That's how we look at it, and that's what I learned. I can't be what I'm not.
Great wisdom, and part of that is the journey of discovering who you are. When you're a kid, you're trying to figure it out, and part of growing up is discovering who it is. And so let me push that back and say once again, it's as a teenager, your identity first needs to be wrapped up into Jesus Christ and allow God to lead you to discoveries of who you are and who He's called you to be. So.
Right.
Keven, anything else you want to add or say to our audience before we get out of here?
Yes, I think my favorite part of the book was eating chicken when you're black and you're an Oreo. By the way, I love Barry Manilow. He's a genius. People look at me like, "What's wrong with you?" But it's just a culture. I grew up in. It was my own culture. But if I would bring out a piece of chicken, then people would judge me automatically. I stopped taking chicken to work. Because I had to, because it was too much. So I had to eat chicken in private because of the avalanche of comments. Where's the watermelon? I remember I have that in the book. In tech school, I had a chicken and watermelon party in my dorm room. And so just to throw it out there, people were telling me anyway, so let's do it.
It was interesting that you bring that up, because when I read that in the book, I had no idea what you were talking about.
It's a stereotype that all black people love.
Right,
chicken.
But
you didn't know.
I just wondered, is that a generational gap thing in the sense of, I didn't grow up in that area? Is it a generational gap? Is it, because when I was like, what is he talking? And I spent a little bit of time Googling it up. I'm like, okay, it's a stereotype.
So go back into the 1940s, 1930s, or 20s cartoons, you'll see that a lot. Like Yeah, and so it wasn't me. I liked the food. I didn't like it because I was black, but they would always allude to that. "Oh, you're black," and they would start laughing. "Got chicken and watermelon."
Right.
So Some things I think are funny. I have to think are funny. Otherwise, but at the same time, they're annoying. And I have to, some things I had to do with discretion. And in the illustrated version, there's a picture of a cartoon of me sitting behind an object eating chicken so nobody can see me. But you can have chicken chopped up, you can have it in different things, but you can't have like a chicken wing or chicken leg in public. That was my rule.
Someone who loves chicken, I don't know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Chicken and watermelon.
So Keven, if someone wants to get a hold of your book,
mm-hmm.
How do they get a copy of your book?
You can go to Amazon.com, look at Growing Up White, and Oreo's Guide to Fitting In. So that's actually what this book is. It's a guide for Oreos. And same thing with biracial children who pass for black. So they have a lot of issues as well, especially when their sibling passes for white. It's like a complete division. Two different worlds they live in. And that's a giant problem. I knew one that was my massage therapist that had that issue. She knew I was writing the book. I was talking about it. She's like, "Oh, really?" Because I didn't think they would qualify as Oreos, but they do. So Amazon.com, Oreo's Guide to Fitting In. Growing Up White. And remember, by the way, this is not an Oreo because I'd get in trouble. So this is actually a generic copy of it. And I wrote Nabisco. Never heard back from them.
Never heard back from them.
So
it doesn't say Oreo. I didn't notice that.
Nope. Don't want to get sued.
Thank you for pointing that out. So nobody's getting sued here.
But for everybody else's purposes, it looks like an Oreo. So a lot of history behind that cookie, by the way.
So Amazon.com.
Yes. Growing
Up White, and Oreo's Guide to Fitting In.
Yes.
If they want to get a hold of the publishing company, what is it?
Brownie Fox Publishing. Brownie with an IE. Also, www.browniefoxpublishing.com. Like I said, we're looking for new authors. We signed 4 or 5 in the last 6 months, so we're looking for more people to expand our empire, if you want to call it. And we accept, just email us at browniefoxpublishing@gmail.com.
All right. Well, hey, thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and knowledge. And again, part of the goal of this for me was saying, okay, hey, this helped me get to know you and help me get to know somebody growing up, again, with that cultural segment. Mm-hmm. And that's part of giving me a leg up or a starting point, if you will, right. As I meet people. And again, just reminding me that, hey, my micro worldview system that I function in really doesn't represent everybody. And so I appreciated the book. I appreciated your insights. I appreciated the humor that you often reference and tackled some very tough subjects with. So thank you for being with us, and thank you for, again, giving us this guide to help us and others. And
sure.
Again, if you want more information, and if you missed anything that you're like, hey, I didn't catch any of that, just send us an email at Faith Ignited, and we'll follow up and we'll get you Kevin's info as well and help you out there. So thanks for joining us, guys. Have a blessed day. I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much, sir.